So my parents decided that we were going to take a trip to my dad's aunt and uncle's house in Denver, Colorado. All I know at the time was that I had not been having a very good year. I had been a very bad girl. I was up to a lot of mischief. I was always fighting at school. And at home, I even kind of like ran away. I just kind of like ran to the neighbors, right? But I didn't tell anybody, so technically I ran away. So I got in trouble for that. I also got in trouble for throwing rocks and breaking windows, throwing mud. Like, I was just a really bad little girl. I was throwing mud at the walls in the house. I was just getting in so much trouble. So I remember when we were getting to my aunt and uncle's house, we were driving down this long road, and there was like mountains and there was cliffs, and it looked like some of the cliffs were red. But when we went, it was gonna be Christmas and there was snow. So it was kind of beautiful, but also a little bit creepy because I'd never seen anything like that when we were driving through woods. So when we finally got there and I met my aunt and uncle for the first time, we got settled in. My parents got settled in. They got to stay in the guest room, and I got to stay in my cousin's old room because he had already grown up and he had moved because he was going to college in another state, and he had already moved, so he wasn't there. I got to stay in his room by myself, and my parents were in the guest room. So I walked into the living room, and they were all talking about me, like what a bad little girl I had been. And my dad's aunt Bernice and his uncle Rudy, they were talking about that there's a beast in the woods, and they call him Krampus. And they said he's kind of like the opposite of Santa Claus. Like, Santa Claus brings you presents if you're good, but Krampus will go get like a branch from the tree, and he'll spank the kids or even steal them away and take them away if they're bad. And I thought, they're just joshing with me. They're just trying to scare me because I had been a bad little girl, remember? So they went on to describe about how Krampus is this hideous creature with hooves like a goat, and that he has horns on his head, and he's like really hideous looking. So of course, like they said, he'd grab a branch from the tree and whip and spank. So I just laughed. I didn't believe any of their nonsense. But they looked at me like they were dead serious. So a little later, I decided I wanted to go play outside. I wanted to go explore. So when I went outside, I started walking around the house, and it had snowed. And I happened to see footprints. They kind of looked like hooves. And I thought to myself, I mean, tomorrow's Christmas. Could they be reindeer hooves? I wanted to believe it was Santa a lot more than I wanted to believe in any Krampus creature. Well, I was so excited. I couldn't wait till tonight. I wanted to stay up. I wanted to watch. I wanted to look out the window. I wanted to see if Santa's reindeer really knew how to fly. My little 8-year-old brain went into overdrive. I'm going to try to stay up. I'm going to watch. Hopefully in the morning, I get a lot of presents. That night, while everyone was already laying in bed, I was trying to stay awake. I was trying to keep my eyes open. But my eyelids kept getting heavier and heavier. Finally, sleep overtook me. While I was asleep, I was suddenly awoken because I heard something outside the window. It kind of sounded like scratching on the glass, but it also sounded like hoofs, like a horse or maybe a reindeer. So I was pretty excited. I got out of bed. I tiptoed over to the window. When I got there, I tried to glance outside, and I could hear breathing, but I couldn't see anything out there. It sounded like it was hooves walking towards the front door. And I could hear something over there by the front door. So I tiptoed over to my door, the bedroom, and I opened the door. And I listened and I stared into the darkness. And I could hear something. It sounded like the door opening. So I went and I tiptoed out of the room, and I went over to where I could see into the living room. And I kept staring, and I could see the Christmas tree. Right in front of the Christmas tree, it looked like somebody was standing there. And of course, I thought for a second, who could it be? Santa? And I could see the red robe, but it didn't look like feet. It didn't look like he had feet. It looked like hooves, like from a goat. So I stood there petrified. I couldn't breathe. And then he turned around quick and he looked at me, and I could see his red eyes and his sharp yellow teeth. And he had horns on his head, even though he was wearing a red robe. And the scream stayed stuck in my throat. It wouldn't come out. I felt like I had to scream, but nothing was coming out. I was petrified and I couldn't move. I couldn't move my feet. I was just frozen there. And that's when I heard his voice. And he said, "Mary." I got chills all through my body. I had to get the strength in my feet. I had to get my strength in my feet to run. What was I going to do? I was scared and I didn't want him to kill my family. And then I saw that I could run past him just in time just to get out the front door. I gained the strength in my legs just enough to run, and I see him looking at me, and he whips that branch right down to the ground. He whips it and he says my name again, "Mary." And I'm running out the door. I just get enough strength and I'm running. I realize that I'm barefooted. I realize that I'm outside and I'm in the snow, and I could see his hoof prints that are in the snow. And I'm thinking, what do I do? I just need to live. I need to survive. I need to get him away from my family. So I start running just around. I don't know where to go. So I start running to the back of the house. And when I'm running to the back, I see that there's these double doors and they go down into the basement. And I think if I could just hide before he catches me. And I hear him and I could smell the stench of the rotting of him. He smells like rot. And I can hear him getting closer and closer. So I run it just as fast as I can. And I open those doors and I jump in and I close the doors. And I think I'm not strong enough to hold these doors closed. So I shove like a shovel, the handle on the shovel, on the handles on the inside of the door. And then I can hear him. And he's grabbing and pulling the doors and pulling the doors. I can hear the growling and I can hear his breathing and I can smell the stench. And he's screaming my name. And he's bashing the door. He's bashing the door with that stick that he has in his hands. And I finally feel that scream rising out of my throat. This goes on for hours. It seems like hours I'm trapped down there in that basement. After a while, his voice starts to sound further and further away, and it sounds like the hooves are leaving, but I don't want to open that door. I don't know if he's still out there. So I sit there in the darkness, and I sit for hours. So I'm sitting there, the darkness, trying to stay awake. It sounds like he's gone. So I try to look through the crack in the door, but I'm just too terrified. I'm terrified to see those ugly yellow teeth and those eyes and those hideous horns and those hoofs that I knew he was evil. Until finally I fell asleep. I woke up and I could hear my parents calling me. And I thought, am I dreaming? Am I awake? Am I alive? I can hear them. I start looking through the crack of the door and I'm thinking, what if he's trying to trick me? What if he can change his voice? But then I could see them and they're calling me and they start pulling on the door and they keep calling my name. "Mary, open the door. Mary, open the door." So I finally open the door and I rush out and they're not even happy to see me. They're like mad at me. They're telling me, "Why did you get outside?" And they thought I ran off again. They thought I was being that bad little girl and I ran off again. I just ran off. Nobody wanted to believe me that I was chased by the Krampus. And I swore that I saw him. I told them, I showed them the hoofs on the ground in the snow, and they wouldn't believe me. They just said, those are just deer hooves. Though maybe that was a moose or a deer. They would not believe me. And see, that's what happens for being a bad little girl. Nobody wanted to believe me. And Krampus almost whooped me with that stick, with that branch. But lucky, I'm here today to tell you this story and warn you. You want to be careful, you want to stay safe. You better be good, and you best get superstitious. Peace.